Where do stories come from? Stories can come from pretty much anywhere. And so what I like to do is just be curious about pretty much everything. I like to read as much as I can. I can read books and magazines. I like to visit as many places as I can. I like to explore as much of the world as I can. And sometimes you might think as a kid, well, I can't go out and explore the world. I can't call my parents up and say, well, I'm gonna go off to Paris for a few days. But there's so much in your own neighborhood or in your own town you can explore. There's so many ways to explore the world. So once you've decided on an idea, how does that become a story? A lot of the time, a writer does a huge amount of work before we ever actually sit down and start physically writing that story. And we're not just sometimes thinking about ideas for a few days or a few weeks. We could be thinking about ideas for months or years, or even on occasion decades before we know that that story is going to work. So what is an author doing during that time? We're doing a lot of brainstorming. Sometimes I'm doing my brainstorming sitting there with a yellow pad, jotting down ideas. Sometimes I'm doing my brainstorming by going for a walk around the neighborhood or taking a hike, doing something that I can just free my mind to do. Every author finds inspiration from other authors. There's not a single author who didn't have a favorite author that they loved as a kid, or maybe 4 or 5 or 10 favorite authors. So I have lots of authors who inspired me when I was young and reading, and those authors still continue to inspire me to this day. Now, this could be one of my favorite books of all time. This is The Westing Game by Ellen Raskin. I learned how to put a mystery together from reading this book. I can look and see how Ellen Raskin planted clues and say, okay, that's the way you do it. And that's the kind of thing that I've been trying to do with my books ever since I read this one. Research is a huge part of trying to figure out if a story is going to work. When I feel that I have enough research and enough ideas jotted down, I will start to build an outline for my story. There are all sorts of different ways to outline a book. You can do a very, very intricate outline. You can do a kind of loose outline. Mine is kind of loose for the whole book, and then when I want to figure out a chapter, I do kind of a tight outline of that chapter before I start writing that chapter. Everybody sort of has their own different way of writing. There is no one right or wrong way to write. What you have to do is find out what works for you. I kind of do a little blend. The Gibbs method is to work in a really quiet place. I cannot work in a coffee shop or any place where there's other people around. I work in a very quiet room in my house. Being in a quiet place where there are not many distractions is what really works for me. Suppose that you're stuck. You're not quite sure how to begin your story. All right, I've got a little trick for you. And what you do is you just get a timer and you set that timer for 5 minutes. And what you do while that timer is going is you just write. You don't have to get all hung up on whether or not what you're writing is good or not. The point is to write for 5 or 10 minutes. Write your story. Once those 5 or 10 minutes are over, you can look at what you've got. I bet you that something you've written in there is pretty good. You'll be like, hey, I like that. You don't have to like all of it, but some of it's gonna work. And you say, all right, that works. I can use those lines. That's a good start for my story. One piece of advice people give a lot of the time is to say, write what you know. But I like to amend that a little bit and say, write what excites you. My series are all based on things that excited me when I was a kid and still really excite me as an adult. If you find what excites you, be it a sport or an instrument or a place that you visited or an area of expertise that you might have, even as a kid, base your world in that. Get excited about that world. Find that what you want to share about that world with other people. So remember, there are some key parts to starting a story. First of all, do some brainstorming and research, build an outline, figure out the story you want to tell, find a method of writing that really works for you, get yourself excited, and then sit down and start writing that story.